Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back. We're going to have a little peaceful discussion on Antifa. But before we get started, like, subscribe, give me some comments. There should be some decent feedback on this one. And if you disagree with what I'm saying, then go ahead and hit dislike and tell me why in the comments why you disagree. But Antifa. I actually just finished reading, I went back and rewrite a couple books. One was Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals, which actually does apply to this conversation. And I read the Antifa Handbook, which was actually really enlightening for the way Antifa operates. And often in my videos, you'll hear me say Antifa type or Antifa like organizations. It's because, unlike many organizations, Antifa doesn't have a hierarchy. What you have is several regional groups, or it may even be a smaller national group, but they are very careful and they are very small. The comparison I would make was comparing them to Al-Qaeda terrorist cells, because they're very small, they're very self-contained, and the reason they stay that way is because they're hard to infiltrate from federal law enforcement or even local law enforcement, because they know each other, they have a history in these movements. Now, the history of the movement in the Antifa Handbook, actually they trace it back to the riot on Cable Street in 1936, which is when the British Union of Fascists, led by Oswald Mosley, decided to march. And they marched through a predominantly Jewish neighborhood in London on Cable Street. Now, you had the Metropolitan Police trying to have a cordon, but they were opposed by anarchists, communists, the Jewish members of the community, and socialists, and it turned into a riot. And that was the initial stages of one of the first anti-fascist groups that we could trace it back to. You had anti-fascist groups that were formed in Italy during the rise of Mussolini. You had some in Germany during the rise of the Nazi Party. You had, coming through time, what I found interesting, which I didn't know until reading the book, was a lot of the British anti-fascist movement was formed in a split with fans of punk music and soccer hooligans, many of which either became skinheads or anti-fascists. And I find it really interesting because I'm a fan of punk music. I have been my whole life. I mean, all the way back to the Sex Pistols, the Clash. I'm seriously a huge fan of that genre of music to this day. And the split goes back that far. Now, more modern times, especially in the United States, the first time most people really recognize that these things happen, I mean, it happened a little bit in the 70s when the Klan would still hold marches and they'd be opposed by these groups, but they were all very localized. And then, welcome to 2007 in the G8 Summit. And this was not fully Antifa type groups, but they were anarchists opposing the G7 meeting. And that was one of the first times in the United States you saw the Black Bloc. And what the Black Bloc is, it's not a race thing, it's how they dress. All in black, with a mask, with a hat. And part of the reason they do this is you have a backpack with a hammer in it. You take the hammer out, you smash the window, you throw it back in your backpack. There's 1,500 people dressed all in black with masks. How are you going to identify who did it? That's why they use this method. It's, if you think about it, it's pretty effective. I don't like what they do. I don't like the broken windows. I don't like the fact that they set fires. I don't like the fact that they assault people who have nothing to do with it, or people who may even be on their side. And a great example of that is the journalist Andy Neff, who was hit with a bike lock in Berkeley. And they're saying, you're either a fascist or you're with us. Well, the Democratic Party bet on something, and it's turning out they lost. By the current vice president helping raise funds to bail them out in Portland and Seattle and Minneapolis and these other places when the riots were going on, And no, I refuse to call them semi-peaceful protests. And Governor Como, the ramen guy, was right. Who says protest has to be peaceful? The First Amendment does. But when you start setting fires and breaking windows and using industrial fireworks and trying to barricade police inside a building while you try to set it on fire and setting fire to vehicles or attempting to set fire to vehicles with people in them, I really don't care what you stand for, you're wrong. But I digress back to my original point. The Democratic Party bet on, well, we're going to support Antifa and we're going to do this and we're going to help bail them out and we're going to let them have their protest. We're going to give them space to be angry. Sound familiar from Baltimore? Well, the problem with that is now we have Joe Biden in the White House. We have a majority in the Senate with the vice president as the deciding vote. We have the majority in the House. Guess what? Antifa doesn't care about you. That sign that was up, we didn't want a Joe Biden presidency, we want revenge. That is very true, and that was not what was bargained for. What you see now, because the protests and the riots have already started again, and they're going to continue. And part of it is they don't care who's in the White House. They want what they want, they want it now. They want a complete upheaval to the system. They want to create a socialist state in what used to be America. And you go back to doxing. There were people in the Pacific Northwest who, once people started publishing their information when they were arrested for being part of the protest or part of the riot. And they condemned people who it's called doxing, but who doxed them and gave out their name, their job, where they worked, their home address. Well, actually, if you go through the ANTIFA Handbook, the first doxing was conducted by Antifa type groups in Britain. They did it first. So because they did it first and these groups want to align themselves, having it done to you is fair. You set the rules of engagement. Now you're angry that the rules of engagement may cost you. You want to stand up for these things and you want to create this havoc and destroy small business and destroy these cities. Then what happens to you is going to happen. Antifa is not an overall nationwide group. It's never going to be. Those small cells are going to do what they're going to do, regardless of who is in power. Because they have a vision. Now, if you ask them what their vision is, they really can't explain it very well because they haven't thought it through. But to a 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old suburban white, I want to be an anarchist, it sounds great. We'll go break these windows and we'll do what we want to do. And socialism is awesome because I've never actually lived under a socialist system, and my privilege is why I'm able to do this. But when they start getting arrested and going to prison, guess what white privilege buys you in a federal prison? Nothing. And arson on a federal building is 10 years. So I would ask you to think that through. As far as the riot stopping, that's not going to happen. Over the next year, I actually foresee it growing worse with the Biden administration's refusal to meet with Black Lives Matter or to meet with these groups now that they're in power. It's only going to get worse because they're going to see the promises made by the Democratic Party not coming true. Political violence truly never solves anything, especially in our country. It takes away from your negotiating position, but these people don't care. Their base is in violence. They believe in violence. No matter what they meet, the Antifa-like or type groups believe in violence for the sake of violence. So it's not going to change. Which goes back to what I've said before. It is time for the silent majority of our country, the ones that just want to go to work every day and support their families, which I understand. It's time for you to create your platform. It's time for you to tell people on both sides you're tired of it. It's time to stand up to these groups, and I don't mean in a physical or violent way. You have a platform through social media. Every single citizen of our country does. Antifa's solution is not the answer. We as a people need to stand up and say, we're going to figure this out, but we're going to do it in a peaceful manner, a peaceful, responsible manner. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, like, subscribe, share with your friends if you like what I have to say. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you disagree with me, then say so, because there may be some with this one. Let me know in the comments. Everybody be safe, take care of your families, and everybody have a good